April 13th, 1743. In the untamed wilderness of Albemarle County, Virginia, a child was born who would eventually reshape the destiny of the world. His name was Thomas Jefferson. Born at Shadwell Plantation, he was the son of Peter Jefferson, a rugged self-made man, a surveyor, and a mapmaker who could tame the land with his bare hands. His mother, Jane Randolph, came from one of the most prestigious families in the colonies, bridging the gap between the rough frontier and the refined aristocracy. Young Thomas was a child of the Enlightenment. While other boys his age were focused on the hunt, Jefferson was consumed by books. By the age of 9, he was studying French, Greek, and Latin. But tragedy struck early. At just 14, Thomas lost his father. He inherited thousands of acres of land and dozens of enslaved people, but his true inheritance was his father's library. It was here, among the smell of old parchment and ink, that Jefferson began to build a world of ideas. In 1760, at 16, Jefferson traveled to the College of William and Mary in Williamsburg. It was a cultural shock. For the first time, the country boy was exposed to the high society of the colonial capital. But Jefferson was no ordinary student. Legend says he studied 15 hours a day, carrying his Greek grammar books even to the dinner table. Under the mentorship of William Small and George Wythe, Jefferson was introduced to the radical ideas of John Locke, Isaac Newton, and Francis Bacon. Jefferson became a lawyer, but he was never a great orator. His voice was thin, and he possessed a natural shyness that made public speaking a torture. However, what he lacked in speech, he more than made up for with his pen. In the quiet hours of the night, Jefferson practiced the violin, a lifelong passion, and wrote with a precision that few could match. He didn't just learn the law, he questioned the very nature of authority. Why should a king across the ocean dictate the lives of men born free in a new world? In his 20s, Jefferson began his greatest architectural obsession, Monticello, meaning little mountain in Italian. It was a radical departure from the boxy houses of the time. Jefferson wanted a home that reflected the symmetry of the mind and the beauty of nature. But a house needs a heart, and he found it in Martha Wales Skelton. A young widow, Martha was beautiful, intelligent, and a gifted musician. Their courtship was a symphony. It is said that when other suitors came to call on Martha, they would hear her and Thomas playing the harpsichord and violin together in perfect harmony, and they would simply turn away, knowing they couldn't compete with such a bond. They married in 1772 during a freak blizzard, but life at Monticello was bittersweet. Out of their 6 children, only 2 would survive to adulthood. Martha's health began to fail, casting a long shadow over Jefferson's private paradise, even as the fires of revolution began to burn in the public square. 1775. The colonies are at a breaking point. Blood has been shed at Lexington and Concord. In Philadelphia, the Second Continental Congress convenes. Jefferson is the youngest delegate, a tall, freckled Virginian who says little but writes everything. John Adams, a fiery lawyer from Massachusetts, recognizes Jefferson's genius. Adams insists that Jefferson must be the one to draft a formal declaration to King George III. In a hot, cramped room on Market Street, Jefferson spent 17 days wrestling with words that would change history. He wasn't just writing a legal complaint, he was defining a new philosophy for humanity. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. These words were a lightning bolt. On July 4, 1776, the document was approved. Thomas Jefferson had given the American Revolution its soul. But even as he celebrated, the irony remained. The man who wrote "All men are created equal" returned home to a plantation run by hundreds of people who were not free.
1782. Tragedy strikes the heart of Monticello. After years of failing health, Martha Jefferson passes away at the age of 33. Thomas is inconsolable. For weeks, he paces his room in a stupor of grief. To save him from his sorrow, Congress appoints him as the minister to France. He arrives in Paris in 1784, a widower in the most glittering city in the world. Paris was a feast for Jefferson's senses. He fell in love with French architecture, wine, and the burgeoning spirit of the French Revolution. But it was here that his personal life took a controversial turn. Following him to Paris was a young enslaved woman named Sally Hemings. Recent DNA evidence and historical accounts suggest that in the shadow of the French capital, a relationship began between the master of Monticello and the woman he owned, a relationship that would last 30 years and produce several children, a haunting paradox for a man who championed human liberty. 1790. Jefferson returns to America to serve as George Washington's first Secretary of State, but the cabinet is a battlefield. Across the table sits Alexander Hamilton, the brilliant Secretary of the Treasury. Hamilton wants a powerful central government, a national bank, and a manufacturing empire. Jefferson is horrified. He envisions a nation of independent farmers, a decentralized democracy where the government stays out of the citizen's life. Their feud births the first American political parties, Hamilton's Federalists and Jefferson's Democratic Republicans. The press becomes a weapon, with both men funding newspapers to slander the other. It was a cold war of ideas that would define the American political landscape for centuries. By 1800, the tension reaches a breaking point. In what Jefferson called the Revolution of 1800, he defeats John Adams to become the third president of the United States. Jefferson's presidency was defined by a single, audacious stroke of luck and diplomacy, the Louisiana Purchase of 1803. For a mere $15 million, he bought 828,000 square miles from Napoleon Bonaparte. Overnight, the United States doubled in size. To explore this vast empire of liberty, he dispatched Meriwether Lewis and William Clark to find a path to the Pacific Ocean. But his second term was fraught with difficulty. The Embargo Act, intended to avoid war with Britain and France, nearly crippled the American economy. Yet, despite the struggles, Jefferson remained a man of the people. He broke tradition by walking to his inauguration rather than riding in a carriage. He answered his own door at the White House in his slippers. He wanted the president to be a citizen, not a king. 1809. Jefferson retires to his beloved Monticello. But he does not rest. He spends his final years founding the University of Virginia, designing its buildings, and curating its library. He reconciles with his old rival, John Adams, through a series of poignant letters that remain some of the greatest literature in American history. The end came with a sense of divine timing that leaves historians in awe. It was July 4th, 1826, the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. On his deathbed, Jefferson whispered his final words, "Is it the 4th?" He passed away at 12:50 p.m. 500 miles away, in Massachusetts, John Adams died just 5 hours later. Adams' final words were, "Thomas Jefferson survives." He was wrong. Jefferson had died hours before, but in a larger sense, he was right. Thomas Jefferson was a man of staggering genius and profound contradictions. He was the voice of liberty who owned slaves, a minimalist who lived in a palace, a man of science who dreamed of an agrarian past. But his words remain the moral compass of the Western world. He didn't just build a nation, he built an idea. And as long as men and women reach for freedom, the spirit of Thomas Jefferson will endure.